All right, good luck.
Yeah, no, thank you. Much appreciated. I'm just having a flick through the basketball reference stuff for the 2011-2012 season, which is when the trade was slated to occur. Obviously, you've got two ball dominant players, right? But in different ways. So Chris Paul wants to play a pretty slow tempo, wants to set up other people, whereas Kobe was quite successful in a triangle offense and obviously had the isolation skills to basically bail out any failed possession. I don't necessarily think those two things would have worked well together. Now, the example that you'll pull up probably would be Chris Paul and James Harden because they seem like parallels to a degree. And the Houston Rockets had a lot of success. That may or may not have been due to doubling down on the three-point strategy that was set up by the Golden State Warriors. But in terms of why Chris Paul and Kobe would not have worked well together, they're both mid-range. So you look at it, you've got two players taking up the same section of the court with their scoring, which, you often, I guess, would crucify teams for having two centers, right? Because they're taking up the exact same section of the floor. Well, that would have occurred with the Lakers if Chris Paul is on there. You don't worry too much about assist numbers, rebounds, etc. What you do look at is, the fact that Chris Paul was not a very good three-point shooter at that point in his career. He was only shooting about 30%, so he's not going to space the floor very well. And you look at when Steve Nash ended up being there, the year after, and it should have been a good spot-up shooter, and ignoring his injury issues, but the coaching situation in the Lakers as well was not very good, and I don't think they ever figured out how to make multiple superstars work. And if the trade did go through, this is the other point of the argument, you would have lost Lamar Odom and Pau Gasol. It's not I don't want to say it's not a big deal, but it's more, they would have found substitutes in some way, shape, or form. I believe Bynum had yet to be traded, admittedly, considering where his career trajectory, would he have even be able to play on the squad? But yeah, unless there was a complete overhaul on the way that this system was going to work, you potentially just have two guards that both need the ball, both shoot mid-range, without a very solid offensive system, without any notable bigs to run by them. I mean, you look at Chris Paul and the pick and roll usage and the success that he has on that, he kind of needs that. You could make a case to say that he'll get that out of anybody. For example, Bismack Biyombo suddenly looks like a competent player in his 10-day contract with the current Suns because Chris Paul can, pass him the ball. But yeah, I don't think it would have worked, or at least I don't think it would have led to the level of success that people were hoping for.
Is that all your argument is? Like, it looks like you haven't put in any homework at all, and you've been playing too many games this week. Is that what's going on?
Is there a camera in my house?
Let me counter with obviously the fact that CP3 and Kobe would have been a top 3 team in the West if they had teamed up. It's as simple as that. We're literally talking about Kobe, all-time top 10 player, and CP3 coming along in his prime, and probably an all-time top 30, maybe all-time top 10 point guard. All right, teaming up with Kobe. All right, at the Lakers. Okay, you made some part of your argument is that they would have lost the depth with some of the players that were going out with that trade, but I think the reality here is that had CP3 come along, the Lakers would have continued to swing another trade and to look to find significant bigs to obviously fill their front court. And the team, regardless of sort of average players filled around them, with CP3 and Kobe, would have easily had home court advantage and won 55 plus games in those few years. That's just the reality. I guess we're probably trying not to defer to a what if and who could have signed up and things like that, just taking CP3 and Kobe together. But these two players are ones that are wide that want to win. That's it. It's simple. Kobe would have respected CP3 and vice versa. And that's a critical element for Kobe succeeding with any other player. It took a bit of time, I think, for Kobe to grow that respect with Gasol, But when that was established, they were successful together for those many years, and obviously those 2 championships. Okay, I think at the end of the day, Kobe, his best point guards. I was reading this article on this topic. Obviously, that his best point guards he's played with was like Derek Fisher. He played with obviously past his prime Gary Payton, played past his prime Steve Nash, obviously. But you know, it'd be a whole nother story, clearly, and a story that they would have clearly won a lot of games, okay, and been contenders ultimately, had CP3 joined the Lakers. And at the end of the day, I think, you know, I guess, you know, here's a hypothetical. If CP3 had joined the Lakers and they had then not needed to sign Steve Nash, but they still had signed Dwight Howard, now that's a whole nother topic, okay? And that's a team that definitely would be contenders. I was looking at the teams that obviously won championships those next few seasons. So obviously CP3 then went to Lob City Clippers with Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan and stuff like that. Miami obviously won the 2 in a row. Then Spurs upset, and then the Golden State Cleveland sort of, you know, rivalry came along. I think you'd have to argue that the Lakers would have had a shot, okay, depending on what role players that were able to fill around these 2 all-time greats. And that's just the point. These 2 players are all-time greats.
Solid stuff. I guess one thing that maybe hasn't been brought up, and I'll bring it up now, the age difference or the stages in their career. So often what we do is we connotate prime with being the athletic prime, but there's an aspect of the mental game that I think needs to be considered. So, you know, you looked at Kobe Bryant when he was younger, perhaps better athletically, but mentally maybe not as mature as he needed to be to have a level of success at that stage in his career. And I think that would have been an issue with Chris Paul and Kobe, because Kobe, I'm guessing that he was about 34, 35 when this trade could have went through, because 2011, I think he played to 2016 and he retired at 38 or 39. And Chris Paul at that time, considering he's 35, 36 now, he would have been almost 10 years younger. So he would have been in his athletic prime, but he maybe maturity wise may not have been able to work.
Are you saying Chris Paul was not a mature player 8 years into his league?
If you look at what happened in Los Angeles, there's a lot of blow up about the fact that it was Chris Paul's way, right? So not only does he dictate the tempo on the court and kind of force people to play within his style, but he also has, I guess, a little bit of a mama mentality, but didn't have the maturity or presence of mind to facilitate that for the best. So what's happening in Phoenix currently? Hold on. What's happening in Phoenix currently is years of maturity, as in, I know what style of basketball I play. I know what I need to get out of other people, but I know how to get it out of them. Whereas I don't think he was that player 10 years ago.
Wait. So you're saying, so maybe CP3, by all accounts that I've read, is a bit of a hard-ass player that expects the most out of you because that's how he goes on the floor every night. And you're saying, though, that if he went to the Lakers, he wouldn't have been successful with an all-time great like Kobe when he was successful in New Orleans. He was successful when he went to the Clippers. He was successful when he went to Houston. He then took the OKC team, obviously beyond expectations. And then now he took the Suns to the finals. But if he teamed up with Kobe, he would not have had the maturity or success in that situation.
Well, it wouldn't have worked as well, right? Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the fit, and the fit not being as ideal.
Well, would you not make an argument that Booker is a poor man's Kobe to a certain extent?
Correct. But I think the difference between Booker and Kobe is Booker had spent multiple seasons on a losing team, not being successful the way that he wanted to do it. Whereas you could make a case and say Kobe had success doing it the way that he wanted to do it. So therefore, Chris Paul can't come in and facilitate the offense the way he wants to, because, hey, like, I've won championships doing it this way, right? I had 81 points in a game doing it this way. I've led the league in scoring doing it this way.
It's funny you mentioned the 81 points in a game, because if CP3 had gone to the Lakers, would Kobe have ever scored 81 points? And then you would probably make the argument that would Kobe have actually done his Achilles? and that was the end of his career.
Well,
Basically, that was
the 81 occurred before Chris Paul was traded. So I think that was 2006 or 2008. In terms of the injury stuff, I'm glad that you brought that up. In that season, so the 2011-2012 season, the one that should have had the trade go down, Chris Paul played 37 games and Kobe Bryant played 58. So there was a little bit of an issue. No, my apologies. Hold on. 60 games for Chris Paul and 58 for that. Now, I'm not sure. Is that the lockout season? Is that why those numbers look the way that it does? Because that kind of like nullifies the whole argument.
Are you saying that they're injury prone?
Well, they are injury prone. I think we know that. If you've like read anything recently about Chris Paul, are you familiar with his like plant-based diet stuff that he's been doing and that he loves?
No, I don't love Chris Paul that much, but sure.
Okay, well, I love Chris Paul that much. So he really focused on his diet and focused on the exercise regime, probably similar vein with what LeBron's done, because he had a lot of niggling injuries as time progressed. So, his hamstring has been a recurring issue. And, you looked at what happened in Los Angeles Clippers. He had a couple of injuries during the playoffs or couldn't stay healthy to get them over the hump. And obviously you mentioned the Kobe's Achilles as well. Look, injuries are freak stuff. You butterfly effect that thing, you can have such a different outcome. But
so to summarize your argument, maybe we can both put this into a tangible number. How many wins do you believe, if CP3 had gone to the Lakers, that the Lakers would have averaged with him and Kobe playing together for the next several seasons?
I'm going to counter this very quickly, because this is in a similar vein of the conversation we had last week about Westbrook. Westbrook can win you games. Chris Paul and Kobe would have won games easy, 50 plus, right? We can
50 plus. You reckon 50 plus? So they're not successful winning 50 plus games in the West.
It's not that they're not successful. It's more the fit, right? The two players, like you. Okay, so maybe the way that I should have phrased this topic would be maximizing the two superstars, right? Because, the Miami one's quite a famous one, LeBron and Wade, right? Very similar play styles, but Wade did have to take that back seat for LeBron to be able to lead the team and for that team to
and they won 2 rings. Was that not worth both their legacies that they won 2 rings together?
But they lost that first season because of that inability to understand the pecking order. And so my case is Chris Paul's very young comparatively to Kobe. They both have injury concerns. They both play very similar dynamics. And obviously the team roster is a bit of an asterisk in this hypothetical universe. So it's difficult to say that it would have been an automatic win. I mean, the Houston situation as well, you could say was very successful, right? It's technically a hamstring away from a finals appearance, but that had to blow up relatively quickly once it didn't work, and that was because of personality clashes, not necessarily because of results.
It crossed my mind that if CP3 had been traded to the Lakers, that he might be playing with LeBron right now.
I mean, he would have had to stuck with them for such a long time. I mean, Chris Paul's pretty loyal. It's more that he gets. Actually, no, loyal is probably the wrong phrase. He wanted out of New Orleans and he wanted out of the Clippers.
He wants to win.
Yeah, he does want to win.
He wants to win.
He would have left the Lakers when Carlos Boozer was the starting center or some shit. The dark period where Jordan Clarkson and Julius Randle were not all NBA borderline.
Well, that's the point. Here's the point there on that note, that if CP3 had gone to the Lakers probably would have never got Clarkson, Randle, Ingram, Lonzo Ball down the track, because they would not have been a lottery team. That's it. They would not have been a lottery team. They would have continued to have much higher standards at that point. And that changes the whole equation of how the league plays out right now, in all honesty.